Fear Not, Episode 79. Hi, I'm Billy Atwell, and I believe that consistently facing your fears is the only way to realize your truest self and to make those confident choices that will help you to obtain your deepest held hopes and dreams. I have faith that this podcast series will show you that you are not alone, that it will strengthen you and give you courage to face your fears, and that it will help you to permanently cross over into a life of living beyond your fears. Join me on this journey as we listen and learn from others as they share their experiences in facing and overcoming their own fears. Hello, everybody. Today, you and I are going to be joined by npole. Hello, Nick, and welcome to the show today. How are you?
Hi, Billy. I'm very grateful to be here. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, the pleasure's mine. Are you ready to fear not today?
As ready as I'll ever be.
Okay. Nick has over 25 years' experience integrating Eastern and Western approaches as a mind-body therapist. With a background in shiatsu, NLP, and clean language, he is also trained in the mindfulness-based cognitive therapy and is the director of London Mindful Practitioners, a group of health professionals who use mindfulness in their work. He has taught his course on clean language for shiatsu therapists for over 10 years in 6 European countries. He's also the author of Words That Touch: How to Ask Questions Your Body Can Answer. Nick, can you take a few moments to fill in the gaps and maybe also give us a brief glimpse of your personal life?
Yeah, sure. I've got 3 kids. The youngest is at university. I live in London, England. Married to a woman who fills the house with beautiful things because she deals in antique textiles. And I've just published this book, and I'm kind of fearful and excited at what happens next. It's the first time I've brought a book into the world, and I'm very grateful to be on the show here on the podcast to talk about some of these issues.
That's great, and we look forward to that, and thank you so much for sharing that. So why don't we go and get started by having you share with us today, if you would, one of the biggest fears that you've had to face?
Yeah, this is a good question. I think the most important thing in facing fear is not to think that way, not to ask yourself that question anymore. We all have lives that are full of stories about what scared us way back when. And if we keep our minds on those stories, it kind of a good way to keep on scaring ourselves. So the effective thing for me, I've found in the recent years, is just to stop thinking that way, just to stop going back into the narrative, looking for stories about what scared me. I've got plenty of them, believe me. And I can tell you some because, they add a bit of interest. But essentially, it's just to come to what is actually happening now. If I am feeling nervous or fearful, it's to come to what is actually happening now.
So how do you do that? And does it have any relationship with what you teach as far as clean language?
Well, clean language is an excellent way. Let me just say what it is, really. It's really just a very simple set of questions, of very simple questions. And they're built around the last word that the person you're talking to said. And it may not even be a word. It may be an action. It may be a gesture. It may be a way of breathing. Anything that you notice from the body is a communication. So if you just bring a simple question to what is happening now, for example, let me just give you a kind of readout on me right now as I sit here talking to you at this microphone. I can feel my heart is beating a little harder than usual because this is not a usual situation for me to be in. And I can just bring my attention to that, just normal mindfulness. I know a lot of people on your podcast have been talking about mindfulness. The thing is to customize your mindfulness, I think, is to make it into a beautiful thing that really works for you, not something you've got out of, online or from a textbook, but just to practice how it really works for your own body. So if I pay attention to the rhythm of my heart, and I just ask myself a clean question, what kind of rhythm is that? And I take a moment, I listen, and it's a strong rhythm is the answer that comes to me. And and then if I just stay a little longer with the heartbeat and my breath, start becoming aware of my breath, then suddenly my body decides of its own accord to take a deeper breath. And I begin to feel a bit more in the chair and on the ground. Do you see what I mean? It's that very, very simple approach to what is really happening now.
Sure.
Asking yourself a simple question and seeing what kind of answer comes.
Are there resources that have helped you to develop this approach? Things that have influenced you that you might be able to share with us today that we could probably integrate into our own journeys?
I guess in writing the book, I had to research the neuroscience side of it. I'm not a neuroscientist. I'm a shiatsu therapist, so that was pretty hard work. Um, but I like writing, and I was aiming to get a readable account of what seems to be important in this. And one thing that seemed to be immensely important in all the leading authorities who are working with trauma, say, is to understand the relationship between the verbal side of the mind, which tends to, in most people, tends to be situated in the left side of the brain, and the body mind, as I like to call it, which tends to be more connected to the right side of the brain. Now, as you know, we have these two sides to the cortex, and they are connected, but they're not connected very well. And when you're having a traumatic memory, for example, the body takes over, the adrenaline surges, the right side of the brain fills with the images of the old event, as if it's happening now. And one thing that works in trauma therapy is to re-engage the left side of the brain, the verbal mind, to find words, names, labels for experience, to name it. They do say to name it is to tame it. So you're trying to re-engage this verbal side. That's why, for example, if somebody is reliving a traumatic incident, or they're just coming out of one, a paramedic is going to look them in the eyes and is going to talk to them loudly and clearly in very reassuring ways, asking them their name, saying you're safe now, those kind of things, to re-engage the verbal mind, because that begins to bring us back to reality as it's happening now, rather than the replay of the event in the mind. Does that make sense?
Very much so. Yes.
So that I've found that's one reason why language can help. And so asking these very simple questions in not such a traumatized situation, obviously, as any therapist knows, you're aiming to start from a place where a person feels safe, and then gently to go towards whatever it is that's troubling them, that they've come to seek your help to deal with, gently going towards that. And one thing I love about this kind of work is that you often find in many different approaches, the metaphor comes up of going towards one's fears is like trying to meet a deer in the forest. I don't know if you've heard that one, Billy,
No,
but I've come across it a few times in different books. It's like the deer in the forest is incredibly sensitive, incredibly alert, ready to run at a moment's notice. And we're trying to just be present with that quality and stay with it so that it begins to get curious and come towards us. that's the metaphor. But I certainly find working with people in a body-mind way, using some language and then using some meridian work, some touch. It often really does feel like that.
Are you ready for the speed run?
Yeah.
What person, whether they be fictional or real, has made the most impact on your life?
One person who's made a real impact for me is a guy called Steve Gilligan, Dr. Steve Gilligan. He's based in Encinitas, California. And I started becoming aware of his work at just the time I needed to. I'd done a lot of NLP. I'd trained in shiatsu and Eastern medicine. And I was still looking for something. And that something was my way to authenticity, I think. When you train in a lot of things, you kind of copy what the teachers did and you think that's authentic. But I saw Steve, first saw him on YouTube, and I just thought, that guy is so centered. The way he was sitting in his chair, he just had some kind of genuinely embodied presence, which I knew was the next step for me. So I live in London, but I signed up when he was teaching in England. I went to his courses, and then I went to his little intensives in California a couple of times. I found out that he'd studied Aikido for a long time. He's a psychotherapist. He has a backstory which is really interesting. He trained with Dr. Milton Erickson, who's like the granddaddy of hypnotherapy, 20th century hypnotherapy in the States. But he also has this quality which I found really important, of being able to use the voice as if it is something that genuinely touches the person that you're with. And having trained myself in literally in touch therapy, using my hands to connect with other people's meridians, acupuncture points, so on, I just thought this was amazing. I thought, wow, we can touch people just with our voices. And so Steve has really been a major influence on my work, yeah, and many other people's, I should say.
If you could instantly change one thing in the world, what are you going to change?
There you go again, Billy, asking questions that don't make sense. I would, I mean, to be honest, my answer to that is the only thing I would want to change is my ability to be present with things exactly as they are. I could be a lot better at that than I am, but that's from my work in the mindfulness world, listening to a lot of teachers talking about mindfulness, the Buddhist roots of it, and so on. To me, that does seem to be the answer. Just being able to accept whatever is happening in the moment, including one's non-acceptance if something bad is happening.
What's your biggest weakness?
Well, there's a good one. I'm going to have to think about that. My biggest weakness is, this is terrible. I can't think of an answer. But if I ask myself a clean question, my attention is drawn to a certain part of my body. And is there anything else about that part of my body? Yeah, there's a kind of sense of not being there. I think my biggest weakness, I think my body is trying to tell me that my biggest weakness is trying to escape from difficult questions like, what's your biggest weakness? But not being funny about it. I think trying to escape, trying to get out of my body, that's been a lifelong story for me, that when something frightening is happening, I try to get out of my body and not be there.
What's your biggest strength?
Biggest strength, one that I really do find important, worth working on, is what you were saying about just using the voice. I love it when my voice sounds right to me. I love it when my voice feels like it's resonating through my whole body, and it's not just a squeaky thing coming out of my head. So that's a strength for me, yeah.
And if you could only have one book to read, what book would that be?
Oh, this is terrible, but right now it would be mine because I've forgotten everything I wrote in it, and I really need to pick it up again. But I'll tell you one that I have here on my desk, which was I heard about in a blog. It's by a woman called epi79, and it's called An Interrupted Life. And I haven't read it yet, but she was I think a Dutch Jewish woman who was taken away during the Second World War, put in a camp in Holland, and eventually died in Auschwitz. But this book was recommended to me as an absolutely perfect example of someone who is able to bring the skills of mindfulness to being in pretty much the worst situation anyone could possibly be in. And I'm really looking forward to reading that. That's An Interrupted Life by epi79.
Do you have a favorite sound?
More certainly the sound of my own voice, I would say. And Mozart piano sonatas.
Nick, if someone would like to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
npole.com. That's my website. I'd be very interested to hear from anybody for whom any of this resonates.
And what parting advice would you like to leave with us today?
Come back to your body. I think you had Dave Gray on recently who said your body has a lot of the answers to the questions your mind is asking. I absolutely resonate with that. It's the answers are all there in your body as long as you listen to it. It's like the deer in the forest. Just find the way to connect with it.
That's excellent advice, and thank you so much. I want to also let everyone know, too, that Nick has generously donated a copy of Words That Touch. So if you'd like an opportunity to win that book, visit the giveaways page at livingbeyondyourfears.com and submit your free entry form today. Just as a reminder, the competitions only last 7 days, so don't delay. Nick, oh man, this has been awesome. Just listening to your voice, it didn't even matter what you were saying. It was just a pleasure alone. It was worth having you on the show. So
that's great, Billy. I'll tell you, somebody just emailed me yesterday saying, is there an audio version of your book? And there isn't. But
seriously, you should do that, and you should have a podcast of your own with just some meditative. You would be a smash, no doubt.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's my next project then.
All right.
Thank you, man. Thank you, Billy. Great to connect with you.
Thank you for joining me today. And remember, you cannot achieve everything, but you do have the God-given ability to achieve anything. So stay focused, out of fear, and keep on keeping on. Until next time, be well and peaceful. For more information on today's episode and guest, or for resources that will assist you in overcoming your fears, visit livingbeyondyourfears.com. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, where 3 times a week we move to a life beyond our fears.